Okay, then we're good to go.
But now you should be. Now this is the way you're going to start all of your podcasts for eternity.
We'll,
so now
we'll figure it out.
You need to have. This is pressure now. If you're not, if you're.
Oh, okay.
That was one of my.
Yeah, that was one of your.
One of my thoughts when I came here, I was like, I don't want to be the first one on this thing.
Doesn't matter.
Because if I'm the first one on this thing, then I'm gonna see this monster 3-4 years from now. And then I'm going to be like, tell you? We failed there. This is like such bad production. We're going to be sitting on a rooftop with a view.
I actually want to use that. It's freaking fantastic. That's great.
What do you want to use?
What you just said, I want to use that. You're not even the first one. That's great.
So this is not representative of how I do podcasts.
That's great. You know, we amateurs were starting out as well here with this podcast.
You need to have this how podcasts work. You have like a monologue at first.
No, I don't want that. A monologue. So what I think I want to do a monologue maybe a little bit later. But
welcome to Khaya.
No, we'll probably shoot that before. Do you want the funny things?
Is it going to be funny? A lot of people say, "Do you know what the funny thing is?" And then
no, it's never funny. It's never. I think funny doesn't mean funny anymore.
What does it mean?
All right. I think that it means
the
peculiar.
Weird thing is
Peculiar. You know what's interesting?
Okay.
Because language has become so freaking imprecise, right?
Yes. People lazy again, yeah.
Well, I think we don't have the exact same definition of words.
Okay, with I think specifically I think English does have they do have the words, but they're just not common. So so English is almost a very, and that's why it's so universally acceptable. It's very simplified. A lot of people will have this common experience that I cannot explain to you what this means. I mean, a lot of African languages, you try to translate the sentiment across in the language. You're like, yes, that is the right word to translate this, but it doesn't, you're not going to understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah. It's, I think it lacks color. English lacks color.
It really,
and then
really
on top of that, you get human beings that I don't want to use this word lazy, but
lazy.
Now we just use funny for all sorts of, I mean, or even expressions like shame. You don't know what shame. Like it could mean so many things.
Yeah.
So you just, and that's why I think you lose a lot of people in your text communication if you're texting in English. If you're texting in another language, it's not a problem.
Actually, you know what? I'm actually trying to figure out, have I had a misunderstanding
in Xhosa
when I've texted someone in Xhosa? But also I text a lot in English. So the chances of miscommunication are probably greater when I text in English than in Xhosa.
But think about it.
Based on the sheer volume of the communication in English versus Xhosa.
When do you text in Xhosa?
When I text in Xhosa, it's always with family or friends.
Oh, so you're texting all in Xhosa, or even like say a friend, you'll be chatting in English, and then at what point are you going to use something?
You know, there was a friend who said this to me, and I didn't know I was doing this, where I would then say that, do you know what I really like about you? You always text me in Xhosa. And I didn't know I was doing this deliberately because there I a Xhosa speaking person, and I was like, for some reason I always would. But do you know whose texts I hate to get in Xhosa? They're very long. It's my mother. Because isiXhosa sakhe is really deep and it is proper. When I go through it and read it, I actually have to give myself time. No disturbances. I don't want to hear anybody speaking. Switch off the TV and read, because it's that proper. Whereas mine is very weak.
But she can speak English.
Yeah, she can speak English,
and she can text in English.
English.
Do you not think that that's a way for her to assert herself over you, to be like, I fundile, but
but
now
funny.
you're gonna sit down for 5 minutes and read this, because then language in its essence is for communication.
Yeah.
So when I even look at my set of language skills, I'm by no means claiming that I'm a polyglot or even an expert at any particular language, but my motivation to go deep into a language is to increase my capacity to communicate. So a lot of this sieving out of what I need and what I don't need happens internally, where I'm like, okay, that word, I don't really need to know it or understand it, because I can still communicate that sentiment without using. So let me not apply. So my brain decides what's the most efficient way to get through this life thing. So if I'm going to know 30% of isiXhosa, and I'm going to know 40% of Setswana, and then I'm going to know 60% of Mandarin, and within this pool of languages I can communicate to this many people. That is what I'm using my language for, primarily because of my profession, is to communicate to the most amount of people. How can I get that message across? Now, in the effort of somebody's going to come to me and be like, oh, but your isiXhosa is not the one from Transkei, and that doesn't make you Xhosa. Like, then again, on top of that, that's, you're like, okay, but if I'm going to know that specific word, then how is that going to change my life? How is that going to... And to get, I think, always the last 20% is you dedicate the most time to fulfilling that, whatever competency it is. The first 80% can be hard, it can be easy to obtain, but it's appropriation of your time. You're like, what do I need here to get to where I need to be? And I find human beings are like, we find ways to assert ourselves over one another. So if I realize that you're from Baha'i and your Xhosa is completely horrible, and I'm from the Transkei, then I'm like, I'm phoning
mine is superior because
I'm Transkei. What's a Transkei? But at the end of the day, you're like, okay, but what are you doing with this?
This podcast is hosted at the stylish Rockefeller Hotel and Apartments in Cape Town. Whether you're a business traveler or a vacationer, this stunning property has everything you need for an unforgettable stay. Enjoy breathtaking views of the city, dine at the top-notch restaurant, stay fit at the well-equipped gym, relax at the top-floor indoor swimming pool, and beat load shedding. The Rockefeller has it all. Make it your go-to destination on your next visit to the mother city. I think on that note, I'll just introduce you very, 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 very briefly. Okay. This is the very first, very, 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 very first podcast. We haven't even decided on a name yet.
That's what I was going to ask.
We haven't even decided on a name. And I like that. Yeah, because sometimes I think we give ourselves too much before we start things. We think that we need to perfect them before we start it. And I think probably some of the most important things to do is to just go ahead and start, and then to figure something out as you go. For example, can you imagine if you're like, I need, a lot of people might not be aware of who you are, and there are some who know who you are. They know you as a comedian, right? Mm-hmm. Now, when you go on stage for the very first time, that's not perfected. You're perfecting it as you go, and then eventually after 50, 60, 70 times on stage, after 50, 60, 70 times on stage, your material gets better and better, and you understand things like timing and all of that, and you become a great comedian, after a number of attempts. And I think that's what we are doing with this podcast right now. You are an experiment.
That's funny because I think it works against all of your education from, okay, maybe I'm getting this wrong. But from a point of view of, say, marketing.
Yes.
When you look at that, you look at communication and you're like, I need to have consistent communication from the beginning. If this is the logo.
Yes.
Of whatever brand of Coca-Cola, then this is what it needs to be for the next 20 years, because that first Coke bottle that they saw needs to be the
Can I tell you, fantastic, I love that you say this because I worked for Coca-Cola. And
I had no idea.
And I can tell you, the very first bottle, they do not look the same. They're different kinds of bottles of Coca-Cola, like from 18.
But the logo has been consistent.
It's been
more or less.
It's been more or less.
I saw
probably I'd say it's been 95% consistent. If you don't take into account maybe the very first one, but it's how it's been. It's really based on that. So maybe to a certain degree, I think I would agree and say that. And even the taste and the flavor, that has changed, right?
Yes.
It's not always been the same because legislatively, different countries, you can't have so much sugar. As we all know, there used to be a little bit of cocaine back in
I had no idea.
in the 1800s, just a little bit.
Okay. They made cocaine then?
No. They sliced like a tiny gram.
No, I didn't. I thought Pablo Escobar invented cocaine.
Oh, that's funny.
Is it not? Is that not the case?
No.
So there was cocaine before that.
That's very funny.
Who was making?
I don't know. I wouldn't know.
I don't know. I
wouldn't know. Let me Google and find out. But so there was a little bit, a little bit of.
Where was it made?
Back. What
1800s was South America even discovered then?
That's funny. The people who lived there had. It was there before the white people discovered it, but yeah. But anyway, so
cocaine was black at first, like before they discovered it and changed it to white.
My goodness!
Okay, fine. We've solved some problems.
We want these people to advertise here. No, that's at some point. I'm joking. Am I joking?
But speaking of sorry, we're digressing. There's a last point, and then I'll allow you to make the introduction. There was, I think, a meme or not a meme, but just like a figure that came out to show that Pepsi's symbol and sign
changed.
And even
that's true
and font, they've got like 20, 30 variations within the same space that Coca-Cola had the same, more or less, that cursive Coca-Cola sign.
That cursive has remained very consistent, but apart maybe just from sharpening it here and there, but otherwise it's remained very consistent. And so I do agree with you. You're right. But even when they started, they figured it out as they went along.
No, I think it's just this thing of also the fear of human beings of starting again, or just starting
at all. Yeah.
So once we have started, we don't want to start again. Once we've started, and whatever else happens after. So you find people committing. I mean, in all sorts of stuff, in relationships, in career paths, they commit to something and be like, we have committed. We have made our decision. We are going. No matter what happens.
I can tell right now, I'm not afraid of changing. So what we'll do, we will try a few things until we're like, okay, this is the way to go.
So we'll be the Pepsi of
can I tell
podcasts.
You? Yeah, we're starting, which is fine. Like I had, so I used to have a YouTube channel many years ago. And I used to have a thing that I used to start off with, which was, what is occurring, everybody? It's Khaya here.
And I believe that caught on perfectly.
It is. What is occurring, everybody? It's Khaya here. And then I go. And then I start with maybe I should start with that. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But Vafa, I know you as a comedian, but I also know you as a human being that I ran into and we just chat in the middle of souk while everyone is dancing.
Are we trying to solicit a partnership from them? Maybe we should have the podcast.
That's so funny. Why not? And we literally just have these conversations, just chats, for no reason apart from the fact that you seem like an interesting guy. And then I realized that I'd actually seen a video that you posted, I think, during the pandemic, and caught a number of very funny and entertaining videos. And I think what I have found for me with a lot of comedians who are really good, but maybe I'll get into that because I actually want to introduce you. A lot of people confuse you for what kind of person? Because I've heard people say, and I've also heard you on stage.
So I think people have they have big trouble placing me.
Yes.
So it's almost like this guy could be anything, but he could also be completely nothing. So that opens up the door for a lot of ambiguity especially with me. So so that's very dependent on what people's experiences are, you know. If they've only had experiences of Pakistani shop owners, then that is what I am, you know. If they've been to Durban, then they're like, oh, there's Indian people, and then there's Muslim-looking Indian people that could... People who have traveled to Cape Town may say that this guy's Cape Malay, you know. So I've found that, you know, somebody with a more worldly view would get closer to what I am. And then people who have traveled abroad, people who have worked for airline companies, they're like, oh, you Middle Eastern. Yes, we notice these features. Air hostesses, for example. And then some may even pick up on mannerisms and be like, wow, you have some Iranian blood in you. And that gets even closer because my parents are Persian. Well, from where nowadays we call Iran. So they've got, I mean, that's what my genetic makeup is. But so I would say you get even closer with that. But then there's so many other things that are part of my mannerisms that are, oh, but that's a little bit South African. That's a little bit this. That's a little bit Tswana. That's a little bit Xhosa. That's a little bit whatever it is. So I haven't, and I think that's sometimes like a struggle that not people we want things to make sense to us. So when somebody looks at me and be like, oh, then you're Pakistani, and then for them, once they've answered that question, they're happy, because human beings, we have difficulty dealing with uncertainty. So if I don't know what you are, that bothers me. I can't sleep at night. So sometimes I can appreciate that about human beings. So I'm like, okay, fine, yes, I'm Indian. It's okay. You go with that, because that's going to make you sleep at night. Because I know we don't have time or even capacity
but also
to
like,
unpack this.
But then if you say that, okay, you're not Indian, and then say like your parents are Persian, right? Doesn't that confuse people? Because I don't think a lot of people know what, they can't even place that. I think most people in South Africa don't.
Yeah, but I'm saying, okay, we've got the same skin tone.
Yeah.
We're from the same portion of the world. Yes, let's bracket it to. It's like, say, if you go to the States and somebody calls you Zimbabwean, you're like, yeah. You know,
that's what happened.
Developed people are there.
That's happened to me. Someone has actually said to me, "Are you from Zimbabwe?" And I was like,
yeah, so sort of. Yeah, might as well, like, because so then some people will even get to the part of saying, "Oh, you're Iranian." I have never set foot in Iran. I don't even know what those people do there. I'm so far removed, other than I can speak a little bit of the language. My mom cooks the food from time to time. Other than that, we follow no cultural activities. We don't do all of these sort of weird nuances that they would do during New Year's and stuff. I have no. If you put me into Iran, if I board off a plane in Iran right now,
but is that a nature of like where you grew up though? Because I don't know if there were lots of people with Iranian background where you grew up in Mahikeng. Is it Mahikeng, Mafikeng? So I'm asking too many questions, but I'm very curious. I want those answers.
So it's Mahikeng officially.
Yes.
I think a lot of people probably from my generation, so 90s, 80s kids, would probably still call it Mafikeng. Mm-hmm. So pre-94,
yes,
it was Mafikeng.
Mafikeng.
So the if you look at Mafikeng, you take the E and the I and you switch them around. So it was Mafikeng.
Oh.
Mafikeng instead of Mafikeng. And that was because the British could not do the gang. So they were like, but we know king from king and queen. So they were like, it must be some royal thing. Okay. So they made it that, and then, so post-94, they're like, okay, we're going to roll out the name changes. We're going back to Mafikeng. And then somebody somewhere must have said, oh, this is my understanding. I stand corrected over here. But somebody said that is not the proper pronunciation. So certain clans within the Tswana language have different pronunciation of words. So Mafikeng or Mahikeng is where largely the Baralong people reside, and parts of their dialect is to use a H instead of an F. So monate hela instead of monate fela.
Okay.
So wherever you see an F sound in the Setswana language,
So it's interchangeable. It could be an H. For them,
yes,
it's an H.
Yes, but it's so the language is mutually comprehensible because I can understand what you're saying. You just say things slightly different, and I'm like, oh, why don't you speak with more assertiveness? You're just like hela instead of fela. Like,
all right.
So it's purely those small nuances of dialect.
Okay.
That somebody decided that this is the dialect for people that stay here, and now we're going to change it. So for me, I'm just like semantics.
Okay, then how did you become so proficient though in the language? Because it seems to me, like having seen you on stage and performing, that you know it pretty well.
Yes, I love people.
Yeah.
I consider myself Tswana. Mm-hmm. I mean, like every bit of my socialization. Well, let's talk about my formative socialization is Tswana. Yeah. What happened after that is really a mix of all sorts of stuff. I mean, even today I could walk out and be Portuguese. But I would say from when I was 6 to 18, that is the time I spent in Mafikeng, Mahikeng, growing up. And in that space, there was a lot of how I got molded. And my parents' philosophy is just like, go out in the street. Those are your people. Go and these like this. They were very, I mean, subtle in the way that they implemented it. But they had a very clear stance of you're not holding on to anything. We're not going back to Iran. You were never there. So you stay here now. And whatever people are outside this door over there, those are your people. There's no thing of like, oh, but where are our people? No. Wherever you see them.
What gave them that confidence to actually say, okay, let's send you out. These are your people. You're one of them. Where did they come from? And were they that way inclined? Did they also speak Tswana? I mean, how?
So a lot of
because that must come from somewhere.
A big part of, or a big influence in just me being alive, me being here, not here in this venue in specific. This is a large influence in all of this is my religious background. So I would say it's a large inspiration or influence in getting me to be the person I am in everything. And as much as I look at it and I may discount it as being subtle, it's very significant. So I'm a Baha'i, the Baha'i faith. Maybe you've heard about it?
I've heard of it, yeah.
So,
but if you could just, elaborate on its core values.
So the central theme or the central principle towards, or the central aim of the Baha'i faith rather, is that we're working towards universal peace. Okay? World unity. So, in that, some of the principles is that the equality of men and women. That's never been said in previous religions. We also believe that humanity is one, regardless of your race, hair color, height, whatever it is. All of these superficial values, we're all equal. Inherently, we're all human beings. So, also, I'm mixing up thoughts over here, but then we believe in three onenesses. We believe in the oneness of God. There is only one God. Oneness of religion. So the Baha'i faith, we believe in that God reveals himself over time to mankind. We believe in a progressive revelation. So we believe that Jesus Christ is true, Muhammad is true, Moses, Zoroaster, Buddha, Krishna, Abraham. There's a lineage of prophets that came. And we believe that God sends these prophets from time to humanity to give us a message which is relevant for the time that we live in, as well as information that is equivalent to our capacity to understand at that given point. So as Baha'is, we believe Baha'u'llah has come for this time. And we're given an indication, more or less 1,000 years is how long it takes for mankind to bridge a gap of maturity. So when this is the time that they would need a new teacher to come. So Baha'u'llah has come, and his message for today is universal peace. And if you think about it logically, if, say, Jesus Christ had come along 2,000 years ago and says universal peace, so people are, there's this village and then the one next door. Like, what universe? Which world? The world is flat. After that, you fall. So it makes sense as well in terms of what the message is. And for most part, during the time of Jesus Christ, you're only seeing people of one color. It's a very homogeneous society, whatever it was back then. So those are the central themes of the Baha'i faith. And the one of the big reasons why my parents actually ended up in South Africa was the promotion of the religion, or the propagation of the religion around the world. We're told as Baha'is, go and spread this message of unity around the world. And it's almost like the equivalent of being part of a missionary. But in the Baha'i faith, it's very individualistic. Or anybody can go. You don't need to be a priest to go and move to another country to go and teach. You don't need to be a priest to teach anybody about the religion. You're welcome to do it. So this is their philosophy, if you even talk about what my culture is. My culture and my views and what I decide to do or not to do is very much influenced by the religion. Or if we talk about the high level principle, my values, it's aligned with that. So when their philosophy, when we got to Mafikeng or Mahikeng, was that whoever's outside were predominantly black Tswana people. They're your people. If you believe in world unity, and if you say we're all one, then what's the problem? Even though they speak a different language or whatever, figure out a way to connect with your people, because these are your people.
Wow.
So it's you almost view people, and I loved your first statement as like, I'm more than a comedian, I'm a human being. That means that's got more depth to it for me, because when you look at somebody as a human being, you just remove all the other frills, what their profession is, what this is, what that is, and you interact with them as a human being. And if it may help me to learn a little bit of Xhosa to say increase the depth of that communication, then yes, I'm open to doing that.
That is it's a very profound thing, and especially because it seems like it's not like the religion itself. If your parents go out there and talk to people, and maybe most of them don't look like you, but they are beyond what they look like, because they have hopes, of dreams, and there's so much that you can learn from them. And the best way to communicate with, or even spread a message to somebody as well, is to speak their language, right?
Yes, I think there's a quote by Nelson Mandela.
Yeah, he said it in a much more fancy way.
Yes,
but like this. That is that's quite incredible. And then I'm assuming that kind of gives you a sense of a fearlessness, or overcoming it all the time, because there's a sense of ego that you always have to fight every time when you have to do something new. Well, I'm talking about myself. So if I go outside and I have to talk to somebody, my mother used to say to me, when I was, when apartheid was about to end, my mom would say to me, "Hey, go and talk to those white kids."
You're that old that you were able to understand conversation about apartheid was about to
Yes. So, and because you're playing the playground, and she says, "Go and talk to to other kids," and I'm like, why am I going to be talking to some random white kids? But she was, I think, in many ways, it was her way of trying to instill a sense of like, these are other people. Just because they're white, it doesn't mean that there's something you need to be fearful about or of. And in the future, you probably have to deal with these people anyway, so you might as well start learning to deal with them now. And so it's an assumption that I'm making about my mother. I don't know if that's really what she was thinking. So my question to you really goes to, So was there no sense of, yeah, but what if I get, they're not interested? What if they don't even get to know me because I don't look like them? Because to some degree, I'd imagine that takes place, that happens.
I can't remember. I can't tell you. I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, and I think with sometimes
because you're born, then you grew up there, and
no, when you're relaying this message of how or the story of how your mom had got you to speak to white people for the first time, sometimes parenting styles are I think at times we don't give our parents enough credit, and then some of it it's just almost a blessing that I see from, whether it's from God or higher power, whoever you believe in, that they allowed your parents' parenting style to be in a way to set you up for the best possible way to do things. And I think earlier this year for a month I was in Europe doing some comedy, and I did a couple of shows there, and I was speaking to some friends of mine, and they're like, Vafa, this is amazing that you are doing a one-man show in a foreign country and you're selling tickets, and there's people that are coming to watch you in Europe, and in partially a pandemic. Like, there's so many things that are working over here, but you are able to do this. And a lot of me felt like, there's a part of me that's like, undeserving. Like, why is this me? Why am I special? Or how did this, come to pass? Or have I, even the question of, have I worked for this? Have I done the work for this? And somebody said something very touching to me, and they're like, your parents have been working to get you here today. What you are going to do now is to honor their hard work of setting it. Because when they told you to leave the house to go and speak with those Tswana kids over there, they were working hard to convince you to leave the comfort of your, PS1, I don't know what we were using back then, but whatever it is, the comfort of your home, to leave that, to go and place you in a place of discomfort, was to develop you, and so they did a lot of convincing. They may have grounded you, and they may have told you, fix your speech here and there, and they may have filled in your application to go to university. They may have worked tirelessly to put food on the table, that you had no idea how that food arrived over there. And here you are demanding Streetwise 2 from KFC. And they would do all of these things to make sure, they would work hard to make sure. So when you arrive over here and you feel that I haven't worked for, somebody has worked for this.
Wow.
And your job now is to deliver.
What I like about that for me is that it also removes or how you understand it and how you interpreted it, and I think how the person spoke to you about it, is that it removes a sense of entitlement, right? Because you can feel entitled because your parents did it. So, I am this successful because my parents did it, so it's them, and I am entitled to this because I am owed this because my parents did it for me. So when I look at is it just, how many kids at home? I'm trying to figure out.
3 of us.
3 of us. And did they all go out like you to speak to the Tswana kids?
Yes. I mean, it's just it's circumstantial.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm the eldest of 3 boys. So myself, and then 2.5 years younger than me is a brother. And then 6 years after him, so 8.5 years after me, is the last one. I think they were hoping for a daughter, and then it failed. He's got really good eyelashes, though, so I think there's a compromise that God reached. Like, okay. So myself and the one right after me were quite close generationally, So all our friends were the same. Or more or less, the people that we hung out with and grew up with, say, in the small cul-de-sac. Like, every day, we arrive from school, we drop our bags off, change our clothes, and we leave the house. No time for homework or anything. You leave the house, you're playing with bricks, you're playing with bicycles or whatever it is, and we're there every single day. And we'll come back when the sun sets. So myself and my brother would do the same. We almost did everything together at that point. So our indulging in the culture and actually learning the language, and most of our experiences were very similar. So we had the same sort of thing. So I think personality wise, we do differ slightly. Slightly more of an extrovert when he's an introvert. So those small nuances does come
they
across
do take
today.
account in the development of a person. Yeah.
So I would say my interest for people and my interest for like being an extrovert, my love for people and love for being around a lot of people has given me access to more of the language than him. But that's purely circumstantial.
Yeah.
The last one, because his personality is also slightly different. His friend circle is even smaller than the second introverted one. And when my parents had moved to a slightly different part of town, and also the dynamic in society had changed in Mafikeng. Because Mafikeng was then part of Mafikeng and Mabato, so equivalent of Bisho and King Williamstown, where...
how do you know about King Williamstown and Bishop? They're super close to each other.
Well, I spent some... I don't know if we're going to get to this part, but I spent some time in the Eastern Cape. Anyway, that was... Bisho was part of the Ciskei.
Bisho, it was the capital of Ciskei.
Yes. And then King Williamstown was part of South Africa.
Yeah, it was part of South Africa.
So the same...
And you didn't need a passport for some reason.
Yes, I think because nice little. It's like Dubai. There's some palm trees out there. What is it? What's the name of that casino in Bisho?
Matola San.
Is it Matola San?
Yes.
Oh, it looks like it looks like Jurassic Park right now.
Really, I haven't seen that thing in over a decade.
You can see that this was prestigious and nice, but then like the dinosaurs have taken over.
Really, that is hilarious.
So I love that you don't laugh at things. You just say it's hilarious.
There was a song. There's a song by I'll tell you where that comes from, which is so weird. There's a song. I think there's a song by Yvonne Shaka Shaka. I don't even remember the lyrics anymore.
Yeah.
Because you used to say, my taller son, Sister Bisho, my taller son. That's how I know it's in Bisho. Yeah.
So, okay, we digress. So this is, Mafikeng and Mabato were the same. So Mabato was Boputu Tswana.
Yeah.
And Mafikeng was South Africa. Same thing. So now when the homelands had been dissolved, now that was 94. We moved to Mafikeng in 95. No, yes, end of 95 we moved there. So my dad moved there for work. So we moved there, and then now already the homelands had started dissolving certain things from 91. And things were putting in place that we're preparing for 94, but then 94 officially they've been dissolved now. And I would say like the homelands were my experience is only post homeland of the homelands, but I think got the sentiment and the feeling of it. It was almost very free to be there. You know, it's very safe. It's a small town. Crime was really low. Quality of life was really good.
Yes.
You know, so that environment when my brother Safa, which is the one that comes right behind me, so him and I, we grew up in a space that in 95, 96, we could go and play in the street, and from Monday to Friday, from the moment we left school until sunset, and it's perfectly safe. No crime, nobody's bothering us. And there we are with 10, 12 other kids, all Setswana kids. And we're sitting there and we're playing, and then we play soccer and cricket on this thing, and then we play against the other street, and then we have these tournaments. We go out the whole day and we do all of these things. And that freedom really to experience life then was there. But I think by time Summer, who is by time he was born, and by time in the early 2000s, as he's going through primary school and high school, a lot has changed. So then you've got a society that also, because of technology and a lot of other things, you're not playing on the street anymore.
That's very true.
So your experience of people is slightly different.
Yeah, that is so true, because and also I suppose how you communicate now shifts over time, primarily because one, people become more fearful of crime, and two, there's more technology for people. So like there's no interesting. So Vafa, Safa,
Sama.
and Sama.
Yeah. So it's 4 letters, and
yeah,
then
I can-
parents had,
yeah.
you know how like Nimrod had the live lotto or whatever. So they had like
yeah.
4 letters, and then they just roll and then wave.
Whatever lens.
So Vafa
and
is
A was consistent.
Vafa is VAFA.
Yeah.
So they had that, and then they were like, "Okay, you got 1 chance to roll." This was the agreement. So they took the first letter and they rolled it, and then it became Safa. Okay. Then now for the last one, they're like, "Okay, let's switch the F," so they can roll the F, and then they rolled that and landed on the M, so it became Summer. So that's I don't. If they had a last kid, I don't know what they were going to start rolling.
Oh, okay. That's
So all 4 letters. And,
okay.
Yeah.
And
but they all mean.
do they have? I was going to ask.
Yes.
What do they mean?
So. Okay, Vafa,
Yeah.
how you pronounce it?
Oh, Vafa.
Vafa is loyalty.
Okay.
And
Are you loyal?
I feel
He laughs.
as human
He
beings,
laughs.
we're circumstantial beings. This is I'm very loyal in making this podcast on time. That's all you need to worry about, is what? Yes, I believe so. I don't know. I think most people's experiences of me are different. So, Vafa's loyalty. Safa is peace and happiness, and Sama is heavenly.
Okay.
So my parents actually their rationale behind those names is that I think it was their own frustrations. They were like, we want to give them Persian names, but we don't want to give them a name that people are going to make a nickname out of it.
Oh, wow.
They're going to shorten it. So
That
they're
is
like, what are the
smart.
shortest possible ones
That
we can
is
choose that the people are going to say the whole name all the time?
Oh, okay. That is.
So that's what they wanted. And I think for the most part they got it. But
No.
some people call me V, and I'm like,
I know.
come on.
But also, also the great things about all of these names. I was going to say, yeah, difficult to mispronounce, but you can actually, as it's like, because I always called you Vafa. Because I never said Vafa, so I did it. So, but to a certain degree, they're quite difficult to mispronounce.
Yes, because there's less to deal with.
Yeah, that's what's my. If I ever have kids, I'll steal one of those names. Did you know that like Persia? I found out very recently about now Iran. That Iran is the 7th oldest country in the world.
Iran or Persia?
Iran. Well, I think they're not saying because
Or the Persian people, the
yes
7th oldest. Who's the top 6?
The tops. It's Japan.
Okay.
Older. Greece.
Okay.
Somalia. No, sorry. Ethiopia, not Somalia. Ethiopia. China. India. Egypt. Oldest.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But who's counting these things? Who was they?
Well, I can imagine historically. So they look at the region. Obviously, the place will, the borders over time, but largely.
I mean,
the ones
then
that
if we're doing that, then we were all from Noah.
You can't go then.
Okay.
So what they do is that I think so they kind of start looking, I think, at I imagine what they probably look at as development of civilization and formation of government and taxations of people at the time. That's what I'm imagining.
You're going to make me very upset.
Yes,
because this is no. I've no allegiance to the Persians being. That's fine.
Yeah.
But we judge the eldest civilization by documentation. I would imagine that the Egyptians have their scrolls and whatever else, and then you go to Ethiopia and they've written something and they've done something. If some of those things have been destroyed, and that is how Europeans can discredit a lot of
That's a very fair point.
African literature, African knowledge, African inventions, whatever it is. So they will say, "Oh, Africa actually just started 50 years ago," because that's the first time we had a book or something by an African author.
Well, I think that's a different definition, because I think that is, I get where you're going, but I imagine how this is charged is because a long time ago you had things where you had city states. So, and it would be like, maybe the one like, God, there's a city state. They're not looking at it as a large mass, land that is governed by a ruler of some kind. And because even if I go back to, I'm trying to think of different, even the Spartans, for example. Sparta was more of like a city-state that rather than like a big, chunk of land that was governed by people. And then you look at the Greeks, I think Athens probably started as a city-state and then expands over time. So I am speculating. I don't know how true this is.
No, it's fine. Yeah.
So, I love
I'm not attached to it.
No, I know, but also like I enjoy like this kind of stupid debates that where we don't have Google to figure out who's right or who's wrong. They're just fun.
I mean things like even I think the invention of chess. Some people say it was the Persian people. Some people say it was the Chinese. Some people say it was the Indians. There were so many empires. And at the point, if you just look at the conflict between the Greeks and the Persians, that went over, I think, 7 changes. Because at the time, they were the 2 dominant forces in the world. So one would come and conquer everything all the way to where Rome was. And then the Greeks would come and then conquer everything all the way into where nowadays Iran is. And so they would do that back and forth multiple times, where there was like Cyrus the Great or some of the other, big emperors on the Greek side, on the Persian side. And then there was a lot of also mixture. And you will see that's how like certain pockets of cultural pieces, or even in terms of even habits and socialization, you'll see in Morocco, they're doing something. And then you're like, okay, that makes sense that people took over from this portion to that portion, or you see droplets somewhere else. And then it's always fascinating for me. I don't think we'll ever really know how did that end up there, but we'll have an idea of this is how the mixture happened.
Yeah, because also I think trading also takes place. Yes. And there's probably like, I wouldn't imagine chess was probably went back and forth because people had to trade. And it's quite hard to figure out where that started, I can imagine. But also, does it matter? So, you studied structural engineering.
Yes.
Which is hilarious to me because they seem like such polar opposites where you're like, okay, you know what, great, I've done it, I've studied it, I've got a master's in it, but let me go and make people laugh.
Yes.
How does that even begin to happen?
So when you
also the safety, right? Because there's a certain level of safety, even though I'd say I really don't agree that there is anything, especially these days, as a safe job, because there's a perceived safetyness of that. And also, what did your parents have to say? Like, you know what? Thanks for the education and everything, but I'm gonna go do comedy.
Yeah, so my dad is a civil engineer and he studied his master's in structural engineering. So for immigrant parents, education is a big thing. And I also understand that sentiment because like when my parents came to this country, they almost had nothing. Yes, they had their life experiences. That is not nothing, actually. They had their life experiences. They had their outlook on life. And my dad had his education. So then he had a will to do something, and then he did something, and then that is hopefully passed on to us. But very much the mentality of a lot of Iranians of my dad and mom's generation was that they, and specifically Baha'is that moved to separate countries all over the world, it was when you're an immigrant in a very foreign land and you have no family, you can't even contact them, there's no phone. You can't WhatsApp or whatever. So you're alone in this country and you're just thinking, how do I survive? So a lot of the foundations that I would say that our parents instilled in us were from that point, but I believe that it's from a point of fear. Because they were like, my dad's philosophy is that you either become an engineer or a doctor. Those are the only two things that I recognize. Okay, and then that's a Persian. That's a Persian philosophy. Most Persian parents will, number one is doctor. Like they will brag about their kids for years and years and years. Oh, my kid studied medicine. Second best is engineer. Everything else, you're not adding value to the world. Like we don't need accountants. That's fine. We'll go back to bartering. So my dad says these are the two professions, and he goes a step behind that, and he's like, because at any given point in the world, you will always be employed. In times of peace, we need engineers to build stuff. We need doctors to take care of people who are getting old. In times of war, we need doctors to look after people who are getting hurt from the war. And we need engineers to build artillery or whatever it is to defend the country. So it's like when we're in war, what are you going to do with your accountant? No, like you take this rifle over here.
How many you gotta count? Like how much will this bullets cost?
There's no more. Yeah, take this rifle, go in the front line.
Yeah,
but in terms of employability or employment, so then that comes again from a step of like survival.
Okay,
how do you make sure that you can take care of yourself financially?
Is it an Iranian thing or is it a Baha'i faith thing?
What the profession?
Well, where it's like the safe. It's like either a doctor. Is it more of?
It's definitely all Iranian.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
But Iranian, and then I would even extend it over to immigrant mentality.
Yeah.
Look at all the Indians.
Yeah. No. That's it's like a thing.
It's definitely an immigrant thing.
Yeah.
No, the Baha'i faith is like just serve humanity.
Okay.
Doesn't matter what you are.
Okay.
There's no. So they were very big on education. Go and study, go and do something, go and have a profession so you can take care of yourself. You can take care of your family that you will bring about.
And the comedy thing, because I'm trying to look at...
There's no job security there.
Yeah, I know.
Are you paying me for this podcast?
I'm paying you in you expressing yourself.
I'm paying for myself.
Yeah. But in terms of the comedy, how did that come to be? You're like, okay, I am an engineer. Were you working when you made this decision already?
Yeah, so I studied engineering. I actually studied actuarial science.
Interesting.
I did that for the first month or two,
and then you're like, I can't do this.
No.
Why?
No, it was tough.
Yeah. No, I've heard a lot of people complain about that.
But I will. My formal communication to people is that no, it was boring. So quote me on that if you want to say anything. But and then I switched to engineering. But I mean, I think there was a more philosophical change. Again, I think this is very much Baha'i faith inspired, that our parents brought us up in a space of where do you find ways to serve humanity? You must serve people, serve humanity, do things for others. So actuarial science is in the financial sector. They develop insurance models. So for the most part, they're serving humanity by giving them a peace of mind. You know that your retirement plan is sorted out. If you make an accident with your car, you sort it out. So that is the service they're providing. Where civil engineering was a more tangible way, you're going to build. So for me, I was a more, monkey see, monkey do sort of person. And for me, like a more tangible example of my service, it gave me more utility at the end of the day. So at that point, that is how I made my decision that this is actually 10 years from now. If I'm to curate an insurance package for you, that doesn't, give me utility. But building a building or a bridge for me, that I'm like, yes, I've done something. So that was a switch. I worked for 6-7 years, and then I somewhere in between there, I've only realized this recently, that I was unhappy some way with what I was doing, because I was in a corporate space working for a private company. If I had my way, I'd work in the public sector, but it's very ridden with politics that I was not willing to navigate at that point. So I was like, okay, in the private sector, gaining a lot of experience, but I'm like, at the end of the day, I'm not really out there to serve people. Right now, I'm just making sure that the balance sheet is good for the company that I'm working for. If we can have one less window in this RDP house, then I'm finding a way to do that. Not worried about the people who are going to be staying in there.
Okay.
So there was some of that disconnect that, am I really happy here?
So was that disconnect part of your faith, or just because what am I doing here? Or
so that
it's
is
just because interconnected because
so when I talk about the religion, it's inspired. Like, I'm very inspired by it. I'm very influenced by it. It's not like, refer to text number.
No, I know. Yeah, I get
windows
that.
in RDP.
No, because I understand that it's a philosophy. Let me put it this way. That is intertwined with who you are.
With who I am.
Yes.
So I will say it. Let me just say I made the decision. It did not. I wasn't happy, or it's not where I got my utility out of. And then I was in a space where I just wanted change.
You didn't.
So I looked at
You
management
didn't get
consulting.
dumped at the time, no.
Oh, of course, we get dumped all the time.
But sometimes when people look, make changes.
It didn't coincide. The dumping happened a couple of years before.
Okay.
No.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Or you didn't go to teach English in Korea at least.
No. They were not taking Pakistanis at the time. Their quota for Pakistanis was already. So I would just want to change, and I was exploring management consultancy, investment banking, because again I stayed in Joburg for a year, and that, in a way, when you stay in Joburg, if you're not a management consultant or investment banker, then what are you doing with your life? So I got into that space.
Why I left.
That looks. You left management consultancy or Joburg?
Joburg.
Okay. So I was like, oh, do I want to do this? And then, so it's just in that space where I just wanted to get out. And then I was just like, okay, I like making funny videos, and I made that. And then one of a comedian in Durban, I was working on a project in Durban at the time, Calvin Goldstone. Do you know him? No. So prominent comedian from Durban. He saw some of my videos, and he's like, oh, why don't you try, stand-up comedy?
Oh, wow. So you'd never thought about it at
No,
all?
it wasn't. The only stand-up comedian I had watched on video and live was Trevor Noah.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, you did not have to be into stand-up comedy to consume what Trevor was doing, because the whole South Africa was consuming it. So it was just like the it thing to do at the time. And I remember when I was at UCT, he had brought his Nando's, or he was part of the Nando's showcase, whatever that had come, and then we had gone to watch it. That was the only. So I had no knowledge of stand-up comedians. People would tell me about Richard Pryor, I knew who Steve Harvey was and Eddie Murphy, but from other things. From their movies and their talk
not
shows.
as comedians.
Not
as stand-up. Yes. They were just funny guys.
I did not know what the stand-up comedy thing was. So he told me that this is like, almost the rite of passage into any sort of comedy. You want to do comical content online? This is, and I think we have spoken about it previously, that how comedy, your feedback is instantaneous. You're going to say something right now, and if they don't laugh, it's not working. If they laugh, it's working. Is something that you don't get online, because I'll post a video, and then I'll look and like, people haven't liked this. Yeah. People haven't comment. Maybe there's something wrong with the video. Maybe I should change it up. And I even maybe stop doing those videos. Somebody will come to me. Oh my word, that was so hilarious. Funny. Yeah. I'm like, okay, but did you like it? No. Did you comment? No. Then I'm like, but it was hilarious. So I'm like, I don't get
that instant feedback, and
so I don't even know if what I'm doing online is good or not. Exactly. I really don't know.
Yes. And it really does rely on the feedback. And
yes.
And because there was a thing that I read by Pixar's 10 rules of storytelling, and one of the rules is, just because you find something interesting as a writer doesn't mean that the audience will find it interesting. And with the instant feedback of being on stage, immediately. But I also find it quite very interesting for me that you decided to just go ahead and go on stage because it feels very comfortable behind the camera and you post and, you know.
But then you must understand that I had no idea what I was getting into.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know what stand-up comedy. I was just, yeah.
What, did you at least watch a few before you went on stage?
No.
So you just went on stage.
So this is what I did. I got this message from this comedian, and I was like, okay, cool. I was like, yeah. Then I'm a stand-up comedian, because I was like, what does it take, you know?
Yeah.
So I invited, I think eventually 8 of my friends in an apartment in Durban. I said like, okay, what do you do? Funny stories, okay? And I believe everybody's got their set of funny stories. Anybody can do 20 minutes at least. Anybody. I went there, and for 40 minutes, I was there. I don't know if I was holding a mic or holding something. And for 40 minutes, I went on. That was my first show.
So this is an apartment?
An apartment in Durban.
In Durban, their friends?
Yes.
That is, okay.
So we're there, 7 people. I think I managed to get people there because I was like, I'm offering popcorn. So and then I'd got somebody to record it at the time, and
so we have this on tape.
There is evidence somewhere in the world.
Fantastic.
So I've got in front of 7 people, and then I'm like, oh man, these 7 people enjoyed it. I'm not sure if they enjoyed the popcorn or but they were having a good time. And then I was like, yeah, cool. Let me do it again. So 2 weeks later, now I told more people, and now in another apartment in Dlanga in Durban, I got 40 people in there. And bam, I'm going for 40 minutes again, but now this is a new 40 minutes.
So how did you get, because the 40 people, so you had 7 and I had 40 people.
So the 40 people is just like friends and friends of friends.
Oh, friends, okay.
Hey, we're doing this. So it was from my immediate network. I got those people to convince them that there's more popcorn now.
Yeah.
I think the word had come out that this is amazing popcorn, and they'd come to this thing. So now 40 people now in this other apartment, and now I'll go for 40 minutes again, documented as well. And I've gone through this 40 minutes, a new set of 40 minutes.
So did you write the previous one, or you're like, I'll tell a story? Because some comedians write.
Yes.
And some just they know the structure of the story. They want to tell and just go over and over and that again.
Yeah. So I think the process is different. Very much my process is actually getting some of the key points across. I'm like, okay, that's the funny part in the story. That is how I need to get there. Have a little bit of fun with that path over there. You'll figure things out. Okay. So in that time, it was literally just, I think, bullet points of what the story was about. I mean, I had no formal training in any of this. I was just like, okay, cool. I'll divide it into like 8 or 9 segments over these minutes. These are the topics. I didn't know I was going to last for 40 minutes. So I was just like, I'm just going to.
That's what she said.
That's what she can probably last for. Anyway, so I went and I did that, and people are like, oh, amazing. This is, and now cool. Now, Calvin had seen these videos. And he's like, oh, I see you now doing these.
Also, people sent...
No. He had seen me posting on Instagram. That,
okay.
Hey, I'm doing my comedy special. You know, all of these things. And he's like, my man, why don't you come to one of my gigs? So now he invited me to my first ever, now in public. Like, people who don't
know you, who have no idea.
Who hate me. Like,
why do they hate you?
So I get there, and now I've come off 2 one-man shows, you know, sold out.
I mean, that is
sold out apartments.
I mean, not many people start off with one-man shows, eh? 40 minutes.
I was hot stuff.
Yeah.
So I went to this place, and now I was so confident, and now I'd written out because Calvin was telling me like I've got 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So I'm like, hey.
Oh, because it's so your
No, you didn't see my material.
He told
like,
you that
you've got 5 minutes. This is what an open mic.
Yeah.
Open mic spot is anything from 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So it's like, you've got 5 minutes at this gig. So another comedian, Neil Green, was hosting, Durban comedian, and then Calvin was supposed to headline. So now they give me, I think, they bring me on the first person on the thing. So I'm there. And I start performing, and now I had written everything line by line. And now, being also an engineer, I was like, okay, cool. I've been in this comedy game, for quite some time now. And
third performance.
and I've got 2 one-man shows already ready to be recorded on DVD. And I was like, okay,
I'm going small time now, doing 5 minutes.
Yeah, so that's fine. So I was like, these guys don't know who they have over here. So I write a line, and then I even note, and I'm like, okay, this second one is really funny. There's laughter. I'm gonna need to leave a couple of seconds here for laughter.
That is a very, because I totally wanted to ask you this question, but you're already answering it. So don't forget. But the question was, how has being an engineer influenced your comedy? Because now I can see by how you're writing it.
So that was then. Okay, so I'm writing that on, and I leave that gap for laughter. And then I've even got a callback for the laughter. Not for the joke, for the laughter. So there I'm like, oh guys, please stop laughing. I've got 5 minutes left. That's a line over there.
Funny.
Please stop laughing.
That is brilliant.
So,
do you guys know callback? So we have people here. You know callback?
No, please call me.
No, please call me. This is not please call me. So please tell people what a callback is.
So callback
as a former comedian myself, I know what it is.
On stage once, all of a sudden, former comedians. I wrote one WhatsApp text. Now I'm writing former.
Yeah.
So a callback is when you say a joke and you mention a phrase, and then maybe time lapses where people have forgotten that you even said that story, and then now you're going to say that word and then almost tie in the stories, and people are like, so you called it
what
back. He was previously said. So now I was calling back on laughter. So I was like, you guys laughed so much over there. Stop laughing. Da, 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 da. So now I've got that line in there. Then, oh my word, the confidence. I had even a line in there. I was anticipating a standing ovation.
Oh my goodness gracious me!
Now listen to this.
Standing ovation.
A standing ovation mid-set.
Because you're so confident in this
Because
show.
I'm so good. I'm like, I can count the standing ovations I've had at the end of a set. I can count them now in my life. But now I was anticipating one in the middle. 2 minutes in.
Performance number 3 of your life.
2 minutes in. The first time I'm in public.
Yes.
I'm like, and my line right after the standing ovation is like, guys, please sit down. Please sit down. The people behind you need to watch. I've got that line in there.
Oh, jeez.
And now I get on stage, and my commitment to my script is like, you follow the script. No matter what happens.
Yeah.
Siyaphambili. So there I am.
Don't tell me.
Pushing. I'm saying things like, oh, guys, stop laughing. There's nobody laughing. Guys, sit down. They're like, what is this guy talking about? We've been seated this whole time. Should more people sit down? Like, the guy at the bar sit down. What is going on here? So they... And now I'm getting stuck in all of these things.
The funniest thing is like, there's a weird thing, right? Or backstage with other comedians, when a comedian is dying, it's like it's not because you're enjoying it, right? That someone is dying, but there's entertainment factor in the fact that they're dying, and it's comedy on its own. And it's funny. The fact that you are dying is funny.
You know, an interesting thing about comedians, because we're so used to listening to other jokes, we get how, technically this works. You're going to say this.
Yes.
So if you say something like funny
but they don't
on stage,
it just doesn't work.
No, if you say something funny on stage as a comedian, my compliment to you as a fellow comedian is I won't, like, more often than not, comedians don't laugh.
Don't laugh. That's what I was going to say.
They look at you and be like, yeah, that's
what I was saying. That's funny.
That's very funny.
Can I tell you say that, like, I mean, not many people know that I used to do stand up, but That's
A good thing not
yeah.
to do.
That one. So and I
Do you have tapes of that?
I've got,
Is that recorded?
I've got tapes of that. So and I used to do this, and so you backstage, and before you go on, maybe and you're going through material, and then you have an idea. You ask another one, what do you think of this? And they're like,
That's funny.
that's funny. That's
Yeah.
funny.
No
And
smile,
then
no laugh.
it's funny when they say that.
Yes. So there's that, and then if
That is-
comedians are sitting in the back of the room, and they're laughing.
Yeah.
If the comedians are laughing, then you know there's something wrong.
Yes, that's
Then
true.
you know what you're saying is not
That
funny.
is very
Something
true.
is terribly wrong.
That is very true.
So when I get off stage and I see comedians laughing, I'm like, I need to go and rewrite that whole thing.
that is
So
fun.
that was my first experience, and then I sort of
But what made you decide, okay, you know what, I'm going to go back? Because I think it can be soul destroying if you are, I don't know, if you don't believe, I don't know. What made you go back the next time? It's like, no, I'll do this again.
literally it's the commitment. It's the commitment to not looking bad.
Okay.
So the other thing is that when you publicly
Was it the commitment to not looking bad, or was it, actually,
let's backtrack.
I'm funny. I am actually funny.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah.
Definitely
Okay.
wasn't that.
All right.
It was very evident from that first outing that was.
Well, it could be that, I haven't got the pace. I haven't figured this thing out, how it works yet, and that's why it doesn't seem funny.
At the time, I had no idea what this thing was. I'd never watched comedians.
Okay.
So I didn't even know how it's supposed to actually even look. So now let's backtrack to me starting something, doing something, making a video, doing stand-up comedy. So I want to change. Now, any sort of escape. Now, I'm quite clever. And for most of my life, I can actually say quite clever things that, because I'm able to read a room and then understand that if I'm going to say something in a certain way, this is how I can navigate through this situation. So I had already made sense of it, because my engineering mind needs to make sense of it. You don't just go and do something. Now you need to build a story, make sense of it, that is going to be believable to people at the end of the day. So I had convinced myself, or I'd first primarily convinced myself, because you can't fool yourself. You can never fool yourself. So I'd convinced other people that I wanted to do comedy because I wanted to add value to people's life, make people happy. And I was like, that is a way that I can serve people. All of these things. Meanwhile, I just wanted an escape. From my reality of working as an engineer in a very heavy corporate environment. Maybe if I owned my own engineering company, or if I was working in the public sector, that's a different conversation. If I would get the utility out of being able to serve people, that's a different conversation. But I was unhappy that I wasn't able to do that in that space. So now I want to do something just different. So I do that. And then with that, it's cool. Why do we do things? Because girls like it. That is why men do anything in life. So I was like, chicks dig it. It's cool. It's cool to be a comedian.
I had don't forget where you're coming from. I had a friend of mine. It's not a friend, why am I lying? So I just...
Enemy.
He's a colleague. So I just started working, and this is how I also got into stand-up. I was invited to go watch... There was a place called the comedy something, of a warehouse in Greenpoint. And I went to this thing. I was invited to watch stand-up, and I was like, yeah, I think I can be funnier than these guys. And literally that's what, got me into it. But anyway, so when I decided to get into it, there was a girl that I liked and I was trying to get to see. And I tell this guy, I'm performing, I want to ask her out on a date. And he says to me, he was probably like 15 or however many years older than I was. And he says to me, invited to a comedy. There's nothing sexier than a man on stage to a woman.
When it's going right. But I can tell you what, there's nothing more unappealing.
Oh,
than
yeah. Because everyone is embarrassed.
Yo.
You're embarrassed for yourself. She's embarrassed. You want to die. That's why I never used to invite people I knew. I never did. So for me, the fact that like your first 2 shows, and those people you knew. Oh.
But then again, I didn't understand
You'd
what
never,
this thing
yeah,
is.
you'd never
you know?
done it. Yeah.
So yes, I'm doing something cool. Chicks dig it.
Yeah.
I'm like, cool. So I need to make this also believable. So in a way, now I'm selling this story. I'm selling the story of how this is my passion and this is my calling. This is my dream. This is what I want to do. It's not. I just want an escape. So I start doing this thing, and now it's also my commitment to what I've told people, that this is what I'm at. So I'm like, now I can't be also bad at this thing that I said is my passion and my dream. I didn't know what stand-up comedy was. How can this be my passion? I didn't know who Richard Pryor was. I'd never watched Steve Harvey. I'd never watched Eddie Murphy on stage. I'd seen him in his movies. I didn't know who Dave Chappelle was. I only heard about Dave Chappelle maybe 3 years ago. Heard about him.
Wow.
I didn't know what the Chappelle Show was.
Wow.
I didn't know. I had no idea. Even nowadays, people will have you seen this and there's comedians that I discover now.
Yeah.
Even now, today.
Yeah.
So I had no idea what this thing was, but I'd committed now. I'm a stand-up comedian.
That is so interesting.
And now I'm going and I'm learning how this thing is to do jokes and everything. So I did that for a bit in Durban, and then I got shipped off to Limpopo, and then that was the end of my
shipped off Limpopo work
for project. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Construction. And then again, I managed to go to Joburg once or twice, and I got some open spots there. But in total, maybe 5 or 6 appearances on stage for 5 to 10 minutes at a time. But I was like, yeah, this is my thing. And eventually, I moved to Cape Town on a project. And then I got acquainted to the scene. And then I went out more. This was about 4 years ago. And then I was like, Weekly, let me go. And initially, the working conditions are quite abrasive. First of all, you're in these bars.
Yeah.
And most people who end up in those bars are not happy about life.
They are not happy.
And then now you want to try to make them happy, and you're doing something, and then maybe you're competing with a pool table in the back, or people cheersing on the side with their beers. And then now, when I first needed to get a spot, it was at the Armchair in Obs, and the guy told me, he's like, you can have a spot, Gino Fernandez. So he was like, you can have a spot at the thing, but it's not for sure. If you work as a doorman over here, and if one of the comedians that's supposed to perform does not pitch, then I'm going to call you there. So there you're on standby. You've got everything written there. You're working at the door, and he will literally come to you. He's like, this next comedian is finishing up. As he gets off, I'm jumping on. There's a minute to go, and then you're on.
Oh,
make sure you're in the room.
Good. Great.
So there you are. Like, you did not, because now you look at it. Oh, it's 7 or 6 or 7 have gone now. I'm probably not gonna play. So you pack away. To stop trying to memorize everything. Then now he tells you, and the nerves you have to deal with. So initially, when I started, I would get nervous 3 days before a 5-minute slot. 3 days.
Wow.
If you had a braai 3 days before my performance, I'm not coming to your braai. I'm sorry. If there's a wedding to attend, if I'm getting married, I'm not going to my wedding.
And what are you doing in that nervous period for those 3 days?
Pacing up and down everywhere.
And are you going through a material?
Maybe that or just panicking.
Oh wow!
Just pacing up and down, pacing. Never, like, my body is in shock for 3 days before 5 minutes on stage. And that progressively over time decreased to 2 days, 1 day, couple of minutes, and then now it may not be there, or it may be like 5 minutes, 4 minutes before you have to get on the stage. But it's amazing what the human body can do.
Incredible.
So now that situation was, I'm like, I would panic for 3 days before I'm a doorman. And then I'm a doorman, and in that, you're going through the emotions of, am I performing, am I not? Can I relax now? Is this done or not? And then he's like, I'm jumping on now, you're next. And you're like, yo.
Yeah.
Do I remember these lines? You're picking out your papers, you give the cash box to somebody else, and you run on stage, and then you do it. So the first couple of months were like, that is how you're getting spots. You do, and then you figure out there's other places, and then you ask around, and then
What I want to, because you said that it was for you. It was like, I don't want to fail at this thing. Then, but now you're still doing it.
So
because it seemed to me, it seemed more like a discipline, and okay, I've got to hone the discipline. I can't fail at it. What is the driving force now?
You know what the interesting bit is that, like, most things I do, I'm really good at them. And there is now, as human beings, we naturally, you tend to want to look good, you know? So you're like, where do I go where I'm good at? So even if you start something, you're like, okay, I need to be good at it. I need to get to a certain level. So you work to get good at it. That's the work ethic behind it. So part of it is just that is already, you're like, oh, you started chess, you become good at chess. You're good at your academics, you do that. At work, you progress so quickly within the engineering space, you do that. Like, so you've got this whole LinkedIn profile of achievements. So there's another thing where now you need to achieve, you pull it up. So that, I would say, pushes you to a certain extent. And you can, I believe that most human beings can reach a certain level of competency with that hard work and that ethic to get there. But there's almost latent capacity which is available to you, but that needs something special. That needs passion. That needs drive. That needs purpose. That is what's going to knock you into your 95%ers, your 90%ers of stuff. So I'm able to get into a point of competency with my work ethic and maybe tapping into some of my natural attributes that I'm generally good at. These things that can get me there. But to be great, it needs to be bigger than me. So now there's a certain level, and it keeps on getting better, which is so beautiful to me. There is a conviction about what I'm doing. There is a belief, and there is a true passion. That's only 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, where I'm like, all of these things that I've been trying to convince other people of, I believe it now. And now I'm like, I want to be a comedian. I want to do this. I want to do that. Before, I was wanting to sell out the Staples Center because that's what all comedians wanted to do. Oh, Madison Square Garden, that's what comedians wanted to do. So you're going to say that in your bio. I want to sell out Madison, but I didn't really want to do that. But that's what everybody's saying. So that's it. So my dream was just based on whatever. But now, when I say that I want to sell out a stadium in Tanzania, that's what I want to do. And now there's a conviction about following through with that. Because the other one about selling out Madison Square Garden, if it's not my dream or anything, I can easily tap out of the comedy space after 10 years and be like, oh, I want to go and do an engineering project over here because I've got many other things that I can do. Yeah. You know? But purpose and your dream is not going to allow you to tap out at that point. But and then I could also just sell it off to people to be like, no, you know, because again, you know, I'm good with my words. I could just sweet talk my way out of that and be like, no, it was more meaningful for me to start this water project in Zambia. Yeah. And that's why I went to go and started it. And then, I didn't really want to do this Madison Square Garden anymore. I'm done with that comedy. So
what I found really interesting about your saying is a lot of the time, right, when people go do stand-up comedy, it's because they think I'm really funny and I'm really good at it. But it seems like it was an accident. And to a certain degree. And then you're like, okay, let me just go for it. And you did it because, well, you're getting good at it. And it seemed to be working. And because you're good at most things. And therefore, you'll keep doing it, right? But there was no real passion.
No.
But and it's interesting because a lot of people think that in order to do anything, since the other way around, because it's like I'm really passionate about learning the guitar. So what I'll do is that I'll go and get a guitar and I'll go learn to read music and because they were passionate from the beginning. So yours seems to be like the other way around. And I have a sneaking suspicion that there are a lot more people who have similar passions, not passions, similar roots to things. For example, if I look at myself, like when it came to writing, when I was in school, I didn't think much about. I never even thought that I'd want to do writing, and when I thought actually I will write, is because I wrote an essay and I got the highest mark in the class, and the teacher was really complimentary, and I was like, okay. Then another essay, I was really good at that, and then I made a proper effort now, reading books and and became really good at it. And then I think that's how then the writing came about. Not because I was passionate about it from the beginning.
True.
It's just that sometimes it takes you being good at the thing, and later the passion follows.
I appreciate that. Then I'm not alone in these things completely, and maybe you're alluding to a bigger fact that there may be other people out there that feel the same way.
That's what I feel most people are probably like, but they don't know that.
Even with me studying actuarial science, oh, you're brilliant at mathematics. Do this. They pay you a lot of money. It's a nice, prestigious job. Go and do this. And that's what attracted me. Okay, you're good at mathematics. Go and do that. And that's what happened over there. And naturally, I feel as human beings, we tend towards, because again, it's a survival space. Where are we good at? Where we're good at something, we go there. We do that. And now, I find, like, that's why even I had one experience last year where I went dancing for the first time. I'm horrible at dancing. But I only went to one class because it coincided with my comedies, because it was on Thursdays. But that was one of the first times I put myself in a space where I am completely not good at this. Not even a little bit good. I'm completely, and there I am dancing. And there's always beautiful ladies at this thing. So I'm like, the one reason why I live life is for beautiful women. And now I arrive at
not like me at all.
We don't discriminate. Any sort of preference you have, that is fine. So I'm in my head the whole time about this whole dancing thing, and I'm like, I'm not good at this. And now I even vocalize it, and as soon as a girl comes for me my dancing partner to dance, I'm already qualifying myself to be like, oh, I'm not very good at this. I'm going to be hard. And that doesn't even give me a space for me to become better at that.
Yeah.
It just, so usually the experience or the trauma attached to that is like, I'm never going dancing again.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to feel like that.
Yeah, I think but also it's the terrible tragedy, I think, of getting older, because one, you don't want to be embarrassed. Two, you don't want to feel that you are not good at something because you're too old not to be good at something. Whereas when you're children, you're like, okay, I'm not good at walking, right? You'll fall. Eventually, you become pretty. You're not thinking about it. You're not just doing it.
Yes.
And I think that's probably the one of the biggest handicaps we probably have. I think that the older we get, we cripple ourselves by precisely telling ourselves that being embarrassed is more important than learning something new.
Yes, 100%. And yes, that on its own is a huge topic that we could go into. But let me just bring it back closer here. And Chris Mapane, so he's my mentor, and I have a lot of conversations with him from time to time. And I told him about this dancing experience, and his I wouldn't say advice, but his comment on it is that go and enjoy or take in being bad at something.
Yes.
Go and be bad, because I wasn't even present in me being bad, because already when people are coming, I'm explaining why I'm bad at this and why I'm not even enjoying stepping on somebody's foot here, you know, without being beaten up. Like, this is your chance, actually, to... There's people being shot in the township for stepping on people's square nose or cavell or whatever it is. And here I have the opportunity to do that. And I'm not living in that space. And I found that very beautiful, to actually be present to being completely bad at something. And I feel we don't have enough opportunities as human beings to be in those situations, because if we do, we immediately say, how do I prevent this from happening again?
Okay, here's my thing, because maybe it's a bit of segue, but obviously, like you said, you tend to be very good at most things that you take up, right?
Because I don't do the things that I'm bad at.
But then what is your remedy for what seems to be failure then? Like, how do you deal with that when it's like, okay, and when was the last time you failed spectacularly at something that you thought I should be good at?
It's again because so there's so many safety nets that I'm becoming more and more aware of what's happening. That okay, there's part of me which will try to avoid catastrophic failure.
Human nature.
Human nature, but I also think that there's also levels. We don't want. Okay, catastrophic failure is nothing to go for. Okay, if it happens, it happens. Great, no problem. But I don't think I've been in spaces because, say, with my education or with the person I try to mitigate certain catastrophic losses. Because I'm like, okay, that is going to set me back so much. So yes, we take risks within spaces, and we're like, we want to achieve this that is unachievable right now. And for that, we need to take risks. But how do we avoid catastrophic failure? Because sometimes you cannot recover from that. So that is actually counterintuitive for you to have longevity in anything. So you want to avoid those things. So I try to be as sensible as possible to try and see where my blind spots are, to absolve myself of that sort of risk. And that's everybody's got their way to make sense of the world. And I think once you've got a better appreciation for risk and for failure and for where the risks lie, and also to be able to assess risk, what is the severity over here? What is the frequency over here? Where do I stand in that bandwidth? If you're able to understand that, then you can push the limits of what's possible better. Because then you're like, oh, I'm saying I'm going to sell out this thing. I'm going to sell out. Okay, what does my logic say? I can sell it out for 80%. Okay, then I can say I'm going to sell out the dome, because I know 80% is already there. Let me just do the full 20%, or whatever the case is. But it allows you to be able to go for certain dreams with a little bit more belief than just like, I'm going to sell out a stadium. Everybody's saying that, So, okay, again, we're digressing a little bit from your risk and failure and what it is. Let's step back again. Maybe we can come back to this about the nature of people's relationship with failure. But so I started this thing because I wanted an escape. And then when I moved to Cape Town, I was starting to do it more frequently. And now I wanted the escape so badly that I went to, because my parents would not be agreeable. Not that I wasn't dependent on them, but they it's always nice to have the support of your parents. So for me to say I'm leaving engineering and going and becoming a comedian, they'd be like, "What's you have only done open mics for 3 months now. You okay? I wasn't even getting paid for comedy. So what am I doing? So I went to my ex-professor at UCT. I mean, professor from the time I was initially there, and I was like, hey, I would like to enroll for a master's. So he looked at my marks, he looked at my work experience. He's like, oh, with your marks, no problem. He's like, we can even give you a scholarship. So I was like, great. So now I leveraged that. I was like, okay, because I knew being a student would give me more flexibility with time to do comedy.
Oh, okay.
Okay. But also, that is what I'm selling to my parents.
Yeah.
So I gave a call to my parents and I'm like, oh, Dad, you've always wanted me to do my master's. Now is my opportunity to do it. And they're giving me a scholarship, you know, and they want me there to do the master's. They want me, you know. So he's like, oh, amazing. And my mom's like, oh, great. You know, education is always something. And I'm like, don't worry. They're paying for it as well. So this is how I'm going to go and do. I'm not telling them that I'm doing this so I can get more time for the comedy. And so this was now my plan at that point, to do the master's for 2 years as a transition plan to become a comedian. But Khaya, I did not want to be a comedian.
And that is a crazy thing for me.
But now I'm putting plans in place.
Yes, that's what's crazy for me.
For me, I did not know what was going to happen after 2 years when I finished my master's. When I finished my master's...
do you think that you might have liked it or had a knack for it and a capacity for it more than you realized? And there was maybe some kind of driving force? Because it just seems outrageous, right? To be making all these plans for it, right? Because all of your plans seem to be working towards making it happen, even though you didn't have the passion.
So it's a point of like, how far can I bullshit people before I get found out? It's this imposter syndrome.
So you thought that, like, was it the comedy that for you seemed like imposter syndrome?
No.
Or which one was it?
No, so I'm like, I don't know what I want to do with my life.
Okay.
I don't know what I want to do with my life. But I just don't want to do what I'm doing right now.
All right.
And I've chosen something else, but I don't want to do that either.
Okay.
But I'm just choosing something else, like maybe. So I was hoping that after 2 years, I'm going to figure something out. And then I'm going to find it. But I just need a gap. I just need some time. So what I sold to people at the time, what I told my non-family people, my family, I sold them one dream. I was like, I'm going to do my master's so I can level up career-wise. I'm going to start my own business engineering thing. That's what I'm going to go with that. On my friend's side, I was like, I was like honest of what was going on, honest as I'm not honest. I was not honest. I was telling them I'm doing the master's so I can avail more time for the comedy, which is the honest part, because after 2 years I'm going to transition to become a full-time comedian and I'm going to get paid for it and I'm going to get a career out of it. So this is my transition zone. I'm going to finish my master's and then go into this. I'm not going back into the engineering space. Okay, which is eventually what happened, but that is another story of how it actually arrived there. But for me, both of those stories was not what I wanted. Both of them was not. But now I've got two sets of stories that are both believable and that are both like I can actually back it up. I'm like, I'm really good at engineering. Bam. I'm seemingly good at this comedy thing. I've got a nice story behind it. I've got a nice passion behind it. Bam, over there. So I've got two things that I can back up that are perfectly sellable to people, and I've got them both out there. But both of them are not what I want, and they're not going to make me happy. So I'm like, Vafa, you better figure out what you want in these 2 years. Otherwise, it's the end of the world for you. What are you going to do after this? And it was then in this space again. I don't dislike engineering. I'm really good at it. A lot of things about engineering interest me and fascinate me, and that can keep me up for hours. I can look at we spoke during
just about sound,
about structural dynamics, and I can go for hours discussing the very heavily quantitative aspects of this, and we can go and look at these formulas and that calculus, like that. Just it entertains me for hours and hours and hours. Same thing with the comedy. Like there's a lot of things that interest me there, but what do I want to do here? And then some way in between my masters. My masters actually ended up being 3 years because of the pandemic, and I even got the chance to go and study abroad in Sweden with it. So in that space, somewhere in between this comedy thing, then it clicked and it made sense. And I was like, all this thing that I've been selling people on this side, I actually now believe it. There's conviction behind it. There's and there was a purpose. There was a whole strategic thing attached to it. But now I believe it, and I'm with this. I'm with the vision here. Before, the vision was the vision was not. It was not imperfect. It was there. It was like it made sense. Everything made sense because I could make sense of it. But I wasn't on board. And somewhere in between, something happened. I'll have to go and think about this. I don't know what happened, but I was just like, yes, I'm with this. This is what I want. And now a lot of my drive within the comedy is very purpose-driven, but purpose-driven with a conviction. That I believe. Because before, everybody else believed, but I didn't believe.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting about this is when people ask me about, oh, you're a comedian now. You're following your passion. You must be happy. They use those 3 things. So now when they say that to me, I'm like, wait a minute, you're wrong. Because I was pursuing this 4 years ago and I was not happy. So people assume...
it does not out of passion either.
Yes.
No conviction.
But people believe that if you leave a traditional job
stable is because,
and especially if you leave it to the arts.
To the arts, yes.
People assume
it has to be passion.
People assume that the arts is passion or the arts is going to make you happy. For me, it didn't. There was none of that in that. And I was like, because my experience is that I left because I wanted an escape. So that was an escape for me. And an escape is not a pleasant place to be in. So when people say, "Oh, you must be happy," I'm like, yes, now, but actually, if I was going to be honest with myself, then I left to be unhappy because it was more uncertainty. It was just another mess. That it was again a career that I had no knowledge about, and I was deep into that. So it's interesting with this that even people beyond the thing of like, you start something because you're good and then the passion develops. And this is also something that now I'm very open-minded to, because as human beings, we're so dynamic.
Absolutely.
You can't expect to be interested or even like the same things you liked. Even yesterday. Today you could wake up and be like, I love artichoke.
Yeah, which I actually do, by the way. But
there's a friend of mine that confuses artichoke and anchovies. I'm like, this is the name. I think that.
The names. Just the names. Okay.
So they were. I think there were anchovies on the table, and they're like, "Oh, what beautiful artichokes!" I'm like,
when people usually, youngish people will always ask me, so how do I? They want to try and find something they're passionate about, and my advice is always like, and which is what I really. I like about how you went about it, and it really proves what I think to a certain degree, which is do all the things you want to do. Eventually, you might find the thing, through you discovering these things, you will find what you're passionate about or what you feel you're supposed to do. Otherwise, if you're like, okay, I really don't enjoy being an accountant, but it's the only thing that I studied and therefore I'm doing. But there are other things that maybe you interested in dancing, go and take those dancing lessons, 4 years, 2 years, however long, keep doing them, go and try different things. And eventually, hopefully, if that doesn't work, that's okay too. Stay an accountant. There's nothing wrong being an accountant. And there's nothing wrong with working on, and I almost feel like there is this cult of passion, which is you must always be passionate about things in order to do them well. And I think sometimes you can just do something very, very well and have no passion for it. But there's no need to have this cult of passion.
So I mean, I'm on both sides of this. So I also believe that things are not black and white, and they're not absolute. So yes, I agree with you. You can be good at something, but I also do believe that there's gaps that you can tap into.
And what I like something that's conviction for me above the passion that you spoke to, you mentioned. I think that is more powerful. But I also think that but also I don't know if you can have conviction without passion.
Like all of these things that I'm saying right now is not because again I would have been dishonest with you again if I'm going to tell you, I have conviction now. So a lot of I think the people that keep me most honest in my life are my friends or people close to me, and usually it's their perception of me. And I'm so open to feedback. I love feedback, and it can be from it, whether it's feedback that I like or I don't like. I like all of it, and I like all of it because it gives me perspective of the same. Say, for example, this glass. Somebody's going to look at it in this direction, and somebody will say, "Oh, Vafa, you're such a kind person." Somebody's like, "Vafa, you're such a horrible person." I'm like, then I'll even interrogate, "Oh, why? What do you see actually from me?" And then I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool." Now all of these sides are available to me. So this word conviction was actually one of my friends. We took a walk, and I was explaining to her about my latest trip to Europe, and she's like, "Wow, Vafa, we haven't spoken too much about this, but I notice a shift. I notice that whatever you're saying right now, before it was like, it was believable, and I was like, I was on board. But now when you say it, I'm like, I'm on board. And that is, it's directly proportional to the conviction you have behind there. And that opened up for something. I was like, what's different? Where are the shifts over here? And then you get a bigger sense of actually feeling what these things are. So again, when I come back to, we can be good at competent at a lot of things. We're human beings. We learn how to adapt. That's us. But I believe that there's some supernatural powers that we can, like, to be great, that we can tap into with things like passion, things like faith, and that is where, like, a lot of things attributed to having a belief system, believing in God, believing in a superpower, can make us achieve things that are not perceived to be humanly possible. But again, tapping into those unknowns or tapping into those reserves that were not available to us. I do think there's room for passion. How do we define it? That is an open-ended thing. I want to say something before I lose this thought. But I have an idea for a book for you to write, because I'm not a writer. But I want some royalties on this. Is that... And I agree with you about how you say that, when you're seeking out passion, or how do you find something that you're passionate about? And you said you do what you want. Okay. I think it can be many things. You do what you want, or you do what you're good at, or you explore things and you do this. And I feel at the beginning of the book, you start with this long thing about what you need to do to find your passion. You need to do what you want to, and then be good at it. And then once you're doing what you're good at, and then so this long trail of things.
Yeah.
And as the book nears the conclusion, you cut down, you shave this off until the end of the book is just like, you do.
That's very true. No, that's 100%.
But I think there's a nice narrative.
No, I love it. No.
In the way that you build it up. Because at the end of the day, and you spoke about the child. The child is just doing walking.
Yeah.
Like they're just
doing
the child walking. When he wakes up in the morning, they don't have to go to school. They don't have an appointment. They don't have any meetings. They're like, what can I do?
Yeah.
I can reach for this thing. I'm going to grab this banana.
And you know what they do?
And put my finger in the plug. Like that is what's available.
They also do talking. Right? And they don't know what...
They don't know what they're saying.
They're forming sentences. Eventually, they just do. And it's such a thing that, like, I think it frustrates me, I think, as a grown-up, because I remember myself as a child, what I would try, like, about anything without thinking too much. And so what are the things I trying to ask, going apart from that side, that what would you say is your most egotistical trait?
Egotistical trait. That's
If
very
you
vague.
have
What do you mean? What's
so
an egotistical trait?
I'll give you an example. It's like if I were to talk about, for example, it's like something sometimes it's something you're really good at. You know, I'm really, really, really very confident in this. And if I look at myself, maybe I should use myself as an example. So I'd probably say that my most egotistical trait is knowing that maybe if I go to most spaces, maybe in Joburg, whatever, I'll go into a room. If there are like 50 people, there'll definitely be some people I know in that room, right? There's that confidence. But then if I walk into a room and there's not a single person that I know, I withdraw. You know what I mean? It hits like a certain egotistical element that is in me as a person. And another part that I could probably add to that is it's almost knowing that it's weird to a certain degree, probably not as good as you, but I have tended to also to be very good in almost everything that I've done. And even if I'm a little scared of doing something, there is almost that certainty that, yeah, I'm pretty sure I will eventually get it. I'll eventually get it right. But then if I try something and I fail, I cannot admit it to other people. So the inability to go to other people and say that, you know what, that thing that I thought I was going to do well, the difficulty to admit that is probably my biggest egotistical trait.
Okay. I get what you're saying. I'm going to answer.
You don't have to answer
it. Directly.
But also, it's a philosophy. I also feel like it's more of a philosophical.
You know, sometimes what is interesting with questions is that when someone asks a question, the questions are often loaded. You know, in a general sense. I'm not particularly. Actually, most of your questions have been quite open-ended, which I've enjoyed answering. But when somebody asks you a question, it's loaded or even a leading question, because they ask it in a way that is very riddled with their view and outlook on life. So if I'm going to, that's why I asked you, what does it mean to you for a negative, so that I can answer what it means to you. Or I can answer in a way, I'm going to give you the truth, but I'm going to relate it to your world, you know, because I'm going to give you the answer. Because if I tell you, oh, my biggest egotistical trait is that my biceps are quite big, you know, then you'll be like, that's not what I want to know.
Yeah, that's true. No, because I think that's what I'm trying to say. And that's why I'm saying it's more of a philosophical question rather than an actual thing, if that makes sense. Because I don't know if you...
So I've got the answer for it.
Yeah.
Or the response. So my relationship with ego, and this is something that my dad tells me. My dad tells me that ego is like a snake, you know. It's always in your pocket. And the snake pops its head out every once in a while and bites. And that is your ego exercising itself in a physical way, you know, a verbal way or whatever way. And that is you keeping quiet, you feeling bad, or you maybe even being aggressive, you know. That is your ego exercising it. So my dad says that you can't get rid of ego. It's always there with you, you know. But you're able to notice when the snake is popping out, and you can tap it in and have it go back into your pocket. But it's in those spaces where you don't notice that the snake is out and it's busy biting people.
That is profound.
And now you don't even have vision, let alone control over it. You're going on all of these things and you're doing all of these things and you're being aggressive and you're pushing around your weight and now you want to fight. And so that is the most dangerous place for you, for yourself, for your ego to be out of control in that space. So he's always pro. Don't try. It's impossible to get rid of the snake. Don't say, "Oh, I have no ego." Of course, you have ego. You're a human being. Just be more aware of when it's popping out, what it's doing. Are you happy with that, or are you not? Put it back in. What's going on over here? So it's more on a space of.
I think that's amazing advice. So it's being in a constant state of consciousness, I assume, because if you're not, it can. And then I suppose if you don't have people who are honest with you, who can tell you that, listen, that's uncharacteristic, even though it probably is, because it's always with you. It's just, is it suppression? Is it talking about suppression of the ego, control of the ego, or what does it mean by put it back in the pocket?
Now,
what do you read out of
if you can see the snake, if
Yeah.
if the snake is this high out of your pocket and is doing so, now
it's difficult to control it now, because
if the
it's
head
just
is only
there.
out, you can
You
tap
can
it
just
in there.
push it back in. Okay.
You anticipate or you preempt what's going to go on there. So now being in a space that I will walk into most rooms, and I know that I'm probably amongst the brightest person in the room. I can go toe to toe with most people in any sort of conversation. Let's go. I'll know more or less more than most people in the room. I'm aesthetically, I may be better looking than most people in the room. I may be healthier than most people in the room. I may be funnier than most people in the room. So these are all things that as human beings, and maybe more as men, because they would say men are more driven by ego, So as men, we would seek ways of how do we dominate over other men? How do we become the alpha male or not even the alpha male, but the male that is in control of the situation, the head lion. So, I spend an incredible amount of time introspecting and rethinking and thinking and observing human behavior and observing group dynamics. We had a small conversation about that and trying to understand what goes on, and even trying to understand my place in a group and what's going on over here. When I do this, what do other people do? What does this person did something? How is it affecting me? Why am I feeling this way? So it's a concept, and I don't believe you can get to the ends of these things, because there's just infinite amount of things you can understand about what's going on. But being open to actually learning, and that stuff genuinely interests me. Like, people interest me. So and this would happen throughout me growing up, I may have not been the best looking person. I may have been out of shape physically. I may not have been the brightest person in a room, but I needed to survive. I needed to excel. I needed to do well. I needed to survive. Let's put it at that. So me in high school, for example, my face was ridden with acne. I had a very patchy, not even a beard, just like patches of hair all over the place.
And look at it all connecting now.
Yes, that's amazing. So I looked like a mess, and I was overweight. All of my friends were the soccer players, all six packs, all really good at soccer, all generally good looking. They got all the attention of the girls. So I was like, what am I going to do now? Okay. And I was like, what's within my power? I can't get rid of this acne. I could go to the gym, but I'm lazy, I could do this and do that. I can't get rid of my hair. I tried waxing and like threading. It was just painful all the time. So I was like, okay, cool. What can I do? I can be really good at school. That's available for me. Bam, top student. Yes, now I can leverage that to get girls again. That's the message of this podcast. Just how do we get girls? So then I would get the attention of the girl. So now, because I was not a geeky nerd guy, all my friends were soccer players. I was the only academic performing person in my friend circle. But I could leverage that for my popularity or for whatever to survive in that space. How do I survive in that space? Choose something, be good at that, differentiate yourself. I mean, this is just like, this is business 101, whatever you need to do, So that was a way that I exercised that. Now, growing up and going further and going into university, starting to work, now you're around the braai. Okay, so-and-so is a marketing lead for a company. So-and-so has started his own business. So-and-so is working for one of these consulting firms, is earning this much amount of money. This person has traveled. This person has done that. Now you're in that space, and there's even you look at characters, and there's alpha males. There's people that are very strong and they push their weight around. I'm not that individual. So when you see me walking into the room, there's no fear. There's no just like, oh, who walked in here? But I have a couple of friends that are very strong alpha males. When they walk in, they want to be noticed. They want to push around. But when one of those males would walk into a room, I would tell myself, this man is not going to dominate me. So I would notice group dynamics that the other males in which this Twitter thing that you spoke about, the other male guys at this braai, they were all
a contest.
No, there wasn't a contest. There was almost an immediate submission to who's the strongest guy here, who's the tallest, who's got the best physical space, who's doing well in their career, who's got the most money. All of a sudden, everybody's sort of in a way, and it's interesting to even see it in a club dynamic. Mm-hmm. You see that everybody knows who's paying for the bill. Tata, right? Fonin, Ngabile. Like, also, you know exactly who is paying for this thing. Mm. The person who's smoking the habli on the corner. Like, you'll see when they have to order, should we order another bottle? They're looking at a specific person. When they nod, then they're like, I get. Then the loud mouth is there. So even in a braai dynamic, everybody is circled. And that, I recently had with a good friend of mine. Now we've become so close because I've been able to articulate this. He stays in Paris now. And I told him that I didn't like him 5-6 years ago when I initially met him, because he was that alpha male and he was very strong. And I was like, you will not dominate me, and I'm not going to give you the same sort of delight that all of these other guys had been like, hey, what are you doing? Hey, what are you doing? And you can see the sparkle in there. These are males, even so much so, like the women, again, are attracted to this man. So for me, I was just like, in those situations, and I'd go away feeling like, your ego's a little bit bruised. You're like, how is this guy? What do I need to do to assert myself in this situation, to survive? I think the people who are followers are completely oblivious to this thing. Mm-hmm. But if you're looking at it from the outside, you can see exactly what's happening in this social dynamic over here. So then it was a constant thing of going back home and being like, okay, maybe not so heavily conscious, but like, how do I become better? Mm-hmm. How do I become brighter? How do I earn more money? How do I maintain my health? How am I funnier? So it's just this drive to become better and better and better and better. But it comes from a very negative motivation. It comes from a point of not feeling worthy, of not feeling deserving. That's where it's come from. Or feeling inferior. And for you to seek some sort of validation outside. So, and I noticed, so for me, what has been an incredible shift in consciousness of this and dealing with ego was to move away from my engineering career and go into comedy, because that moved away from a stable salary to not knowing what you're going to do next. Like, from a point where now your younger brothers are now offering to help you financially as in daughter. When you are the eldest son of a family, you grow up with that thought that if something goes wrong in this family, it's me. I need to be everybody's safety net. And then to interrogate, what is behind that? Is that ego behind that? Is that pride behind that? Can you let go of that? You're trying to do something here. And all of these things are inhibiting in you achieving these great things that you want to achieve. Because if I'm to say, oh, ego and my responsibility, I'll be stuck in an engineering job my whole life, doing something I'm unhappy with, earning a lot of money, yes.
Yeah.
But it's all a lie.
Also, I like I really like what you're saying, because it's this this constantation of the ego, where you allow it to. I mean, there's a thing that I've always said to myself that has never been tested. So, and what I say is, does this mean I am just saying this? Therefore, why have I not given myself the opportunity to have it tested? For example, when it comes to dating, I've always said, I would marry a woman who, makes, more money than I do, who has a higher social standing, whatever that means in society, and this, I've never tested this. And so the question that I usually ask myself, having not tested it, is it just a nice thing that I'm telling myself? But because my ego might not be able to handle the reality. And I almost feel like those kinds of questions you have to ask yourself before you even find yourself in that kind of environment, to see if, okay, what will happen if such and such a thing happens? Did you ever find yourself, like, what if I do stop, my engineering job, and I start doing comedy, and things don't go as well as quickly as I would like them to? What does that mean for my standing within myself? Not even standing in terms of what other people see, what they think about. Yeah, because you'll be very aware of what they say, and that is not as important as what you think as a result. So how does that work for you?
There's been a lot of that, because so a lot of people will be like, oh, you've got a fallback plan. You can always go, and I can walk into most engineering jobs right now. And people are like, oh, you've got that sense of, so it's fine, you can. But for me, I don't like that word, because I'm like, I'm doing something, and I made it. I'm making, so what I'm present to is that I'm making decisions all the time. I can decide whatever I want to do it in. I can decide right after this podcast that I'm going to turn my LinkedIn on now, and I'm going to find an engineering job. I can do that. And then 2 weeks after that, I can quit that job and then go back to comment. Or I could even go and open a pizza shop. I can do whatever I want to do. So being really present, that at any point in time, you can do what you want. That is very empowering, as opposed to being a fiddle of people's expectations or the world's expectations. Or the worst type of expectations is your own expectations of yourself. We forget that we are expectation-creating machines in ourselves.
Okay, go more into that.
So now you will...
Because I think I get it, but I really want to understand.
You are living your life right now with whatever measure or whatever level of success in there. But there's also Khaya inside who's saying that this is not successful enough for the time that you have been doing what you're doing. This is not good enough. You are not this, you are not that. And those are your own and sometimes they could be, sometimes people will make it an excuse, that drives me, that makes me better and whatever. But it's a miserable space to be in, because you're never happy. You're never collecting your flowers. You're just, but I could be doing better.
Yeah.
Oh my word, the amount of times that you hear that outside there. Yeah, but I should be further. Nobody said that. These are people who have started their own businesses, got so much money and funding for this, and you're like, congratulations. Yeah, but I should have. You didn't even know further was possible, but they're telling you that they should have been further. So there's a whole lot of that happens, and that usually the worst type of expectations, your own expectations on yourself. So being a little bit aware of all those that, and again, what I'm saying, similar to the ego, we can't get rid of these. You're going to create expectations every morning. The best thing you can do is just recognize you're creating an expectation, recognize it's an expectation, and then be like, okay, cool. Do I want to feel that way or not? Close it up, bam, sort it out, move on. So it's a matter of dealing with whatever arrives at your desk. Instead of assuming that you can clear your desk or remove all of these things, they're always going to pop up. Money has a lot of positives, because money, the positives about money is that it's measurable. That's the thing. That's the only thing that makes it mind-blowing, is that it's measurable. Nobody can measure your level of passion. Oh, Khaya's operating at 80% passion now. Like, you can't do it. Otherwise, then you would be the most successful guy, because you're operating at 80% passion. But that's not measurable. You come in, I'm operating at 80%. Chief, bank account. Numbers don't lie.
Yeah.
So usually we peg our ego to that. So your confidence is pegged to your bank balance. And it's not pegged to, I'm doing what I want. I'm doing what makes me happy. I'm making people happy. They'll be like, how can you measure that? You know? It's pegged to all of these things that are inherently very flawed, because it's so circumstantial whether you got that salary or not. Who decided you must get that salary?
Well, I mean, one will also look at what you get because of it, right? So, for example, you're talking about because, as we're saying, because chicks dig it, right? So there is also that perception that everybody knows that if the dollar is there, you may have more access to maybe the kinds of women you thought that you couldn't have access to. And then and that becomes important to you, because that's what the end result of having the money means to you. A big house, big cars, and therefore it's the different things that it says about you, as opposed to what it really says, who you really are, I think, as a person. And I think a lot of the time, a person's wisdom or intelligence and kindness, or whatever you say, someone will be given more leeway because they just happen to have more money, rather than, okay, are you actually a compelling human being? Yeah. Or you are just a shiny object with money?
Again, this, like, even if you're talking about a compelling human being, we're putting some sort of value on self-worth. This is how I see it. Because now, so what, me being in the space of moving from a stable salary, an engineering salary, to not knowing, whether you're going to do this, depending on younger siblings.
Sorry, but how can there be no value in self-worth? Because I am placing value, and I agree. So, but I don't, in my mind, I don't see how there can be no. That's why I'm saying that this person has no self-worth and that person has self-worth. There is a certain level of value there.
So I believe that when we are born already worthy. But the mere fact of you being born, you're born worthy. Not because you're born in Khayelitsha or you're born in Constantia. But
isn't the process, though, of doing things also about making myself more worthy? More, I know. It's a kind of a discussion that I'm wrapping this around my head, trying to figure out as well.
Yeah, I haven't interrogated it completely. This is something that is actually very, very fresh. 3 weeks in from a conversation I had with a good friend of mine, and when we we peg a lot of thing to, well, our ego pegs a lot of thing to or our ego and our pride and our confidence, the way we carry ourselves, to these material things. So, for example, the money. So when this thing left me, there's some opportunity for me to actually interrogate what is the makeup on this and what is going on. Even for me to get onto stage with a certain level of confidence. I'm maybe walking on stage because my girlfriend is the hottest girlfriend in the room. Or this is what men peg thing to. Girls, their ability to get girls, whether it's a pretty girl or not. Money. I think girls' money, status, influence, how many followers you have on Instagram. These are all of these things that you can peg your confidence to. So I look at it from a risk point of view. I'm like, this is so risky. I'm pegging my whole confidence of my career, of my ability to get onto stage. I'm pegging it to all of these things that can be taken just like this. Somebody puts out an article. Vafa is an abusive partner. No access to any more hot girls ever. Gone. I can't use that to be confident. Somebody decides that they're going to steal all of my money. Bam, all the money gone. Somebody hacks my Instagram account. No more followers. Or I get banned off the profile. Somebody decides to make a campaign. Somebody decides that, you're not credible and your status must be taken away. Some person does some campaign around you. All of these things can disappear like this. And this is what I've based my whole confidence on. So for me, I look at it from a risk management point of view, and I'm like, and I'm not saying that I'm not at the end of this journey, because now I'm just like playing with it. I'm just like, okay, cool. I can understand the money aspect. Yes, I need money for this and this, but I understand my relationship with money. I'm understanding it all the time, a bit more. But when I look at it, I'm like, these are the risks over here. I can't be pushing my weight in a room just because I can order 10 more bottles than you. Because now if my money disappears, then I can't, then what? Then now I'm not relevant anymore. So I find that in this world, people have become so dependent on whatever their source of that pride and confidence is, that at the same time, it becomes so fickle. Because that can be taken away just like that, and then you lose everything.
But the crazy thing is we have seen that happen so many times to so many people, where they lose that source of pride and confidence. And yet we seem to lack the ability to understand that that happens and it can happen, and then to continue to want to attach.
Yeah, because that is how the economy of the world is set up. Girls, money, status, popularity. That's how it's set up. We've known this for years. And, one of two things happens when somebody drops from there to there. It's either they come out with some sort of spiritual awakening and realization, and they become so actually self-aware, or they kill themselves and they disappear. Or, they go into drugs or whatever the case is. There's one of two outcomes. So I'm like, why can you not do this first one before you lose all of your money? Like, do you need to lose all of your money?
Because we don't take that as a meaningful measure of worth according to society. And that's what happens. And like when you are even in school, your worth, it's like, did you get the highest marks? Okay, great. Are you in the first team? Are you in this? So your entire life from the beginning is set up on these markers of achievement. And each time you get a certain milestone, it's like, your self-worth. And yet, a lot of the times, you have people who are these high achievers who still feel incredibly empty inside, despite having what seems to be everything, right? Yeah. Because I think as a society, we don't encourage self-work. And because we don't encourage self-work, it gets very hard to actually win ourselves from these things that can just be taken away at any moment.
So again, all of these things, what the benefit is that they're measurable. You can count how many supermodels you have had as ex-girlfriends. That's measurable. You can say, hey, here's the... Not super hand models, like we're talking about the whole package, the party, the person, the face. So you can count, that's quantifiable. You can count the money you have. This is how measure. And now I'm going to bring in something from the perspective of the Baha'i faith. So and I think we alluded to it even before this podcast, when we were speaking about forms of governance.
Yes.
Does a democracy work? Does this work? But now if we look at forms of way of of governance, but primarily governing economics. We've got socialism, communism, and capitalism. Those are the main three ones. Maybe there's no country that's purely one. They've got like attributes of all of them. But all of these govern society by the means of some monetary policy and how they divide natural resources of the country and wealth. But all of these systems, what they have in common is that they're all pegged to money. They're all measurable by success in each of these systems is measured by how much material stuff you have. If you've got the most money in a capitalist world in the USA, then you're the winner of this. And then same way in your socialist government or your communist government, if you're part of the oligarch in Russia, then you've got this and you've got that, and you've won the system. You know, there's always ways that you can do better. The system is set up that people are competing against each other to be well off. I mean, you would argue that maybe the philosophy of certain ones is to be more beneficial to this and that, and so the Baha'i faith's perspective is that what is wrong with these ways of governing society is that they're all based, or they're all pegged to something that is integrally flawed, which is material worth. Because if I'm supposed to get more materials, if the aim of the game is to get the most amount of material things are finite. So if I get the most, that means somebody's getting the least. That means somebody's getting less. That means somebody's getting nothing at all. It always comes at the expense of somebody else because it's very finite. There's only a certain amount of gold in the world. You can't get more, physically get more. So that's how the system is flawed. If we're in the pursuit of the most, it's going to be at the expense of somebody. So this doesn't make sense for the benefit of people. So now what the Baha'i faith does is that it's not heavily prescriptive, but it gives us the guidelines of how we move to this space. And it says that the world needs to shift where we attribute value to spiritual value. Okay? So when we speak about spiritual value, now we'll be competing in terms of who's got the most love. Love is an infinite commodity. It's something that's never ending. You can always love more. You can never say, I finished love. You can always be more generous. You can always be more kind. Now, if it's a constant competitiveness among humanity to see, how can I be the most kind? How can I be? Naturally, we will all be uplifted materially, physically, our entire well-being, whether it be spiritually, physically, money-wise, we're all uplifted in that space. But that is the pursuit of something that is not finite.
And that is greater, it's greater than something that can be taken away.
Yeah. So now I'm figuring this out in this conversation because I haven't had to actually unpack this anywhere else. That our source of confidence, our source of pride, our source of self-worth is most of the time pegged to physical things, is material things that are very finite and that are circumstantial. We may or may not get it and they may disappear the next day. But now if I peg my confidence to how kind I am every day, how loving I am every day, how generous I am every day, how I'm serving people every day, that is something that is infinite and that I can pursue all my life for. And that's something that you can never take away my love. No matter what you do, you can never take away my love. You can never take away my kindness. How I decide to treat somebody on the street, you can't take that away from me. So that seems like a less...
Even if I lose my money, you can't take that away.
You can't.
Yeah.
So that seems like such a better way to place your confidence, your self-worth in that, as opposed to something that can disappear.
I think, I completely agree with that. And I think most people probably agree with it, but most find it very difficult to follow through.
It's very difficult because you almost have to reprogram almost whole society. You have to even reprogram your mind because we live in a world where these are the rules of the game. This is where everybody has sort of unconsciously agreed that the
That
most
is-
money means success.
Yeah.
Oh, what have you done, Khaya? Where have you worked?
Yeah. What have you done? Who are you? Who do you know? Who can you call? Who's the most important person on the phone? You know. But yeah, I think we've had a really, really fantastic conversation. We
Thank you.
went here and there and there.
We didn't even leave Mafikeng. Do you know that?
We didn't leave Mafikeng, and I even wanted to ask you about women and stuff. And we,
Yeah. When the podcast is successful one day, we'll be back.
so yeah, thank
If-
you. Yeah, no, you will be back. Don't worry, you will be back. Is that conviction or just? I'm trying to think.
Who knows if this will even go out there? Maybe you might just look at me like, no, I don't
no,
want to do this.
oh,
thing.
no,
I'm not going to be good at this.
No, listen, we gotta go. We gotta go. What did you say? Get up and go.
Do.
Yeah, you gotta get up and do. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming to see us with our big audience of 3.